Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. Today I am excited to bring you a brand new series of videos. This is going to be a monthly video series and it's channel membership Q&A. So I have subscribers on this channel and then I also have channel members, and those are the people that hit the join button down below and they get a bunch of extra perks. Part of that is that they can send me questions throughout the month and I'm going to turn that into a video that is basically a Q&A format. So it's pretty cool because I think it's going to benefit everybody, no matter if you're watching this as a member, a subscriber, or even just a visitor. So I encourage you, if you get value out of this video, to go ahead and subscribe and even consider joining as a member. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first three questions are going to come from Eliana. So Eliana is a longtime supporter of the channel. Thank you very much. And her first question is, how does a vendor show authority in their field without overdoing it? So this is a really good question because it shows awareness from her, because you always want to strike a balance when you're communicating with your customers. Okay, when you're communicating with shoppers, you want to come off as knowledgeable and confident, but you don't want to come off as overbearing and cocky and arrogant or whatever, So there's definitely like a sweet spot there. So some of the things that you can do to find this sweet spot and show that you are an authority in your field is customer feedback. That's a big thing. So on your social media sites, and if you have a website, I would highly encourage you to start incorporating some positive feedback and reviews into those sites and online presence. That is going to establish you as credible and reliable from your shoppers. So that's one way to incorporate this into your online presence. It's not as easy doing this at an in-person event. Maybe you can print out like some reviews or some feedback. One thing that you can do is have maybe like not on your business card, but I've seen this a couple times now with other vendors where they have like a handout card, and maybe it can be like a little brochure. It could be like just like a one-sided brochure or however you want to do it, but some kind of like handout that you can give to people that tells them a little bit about you and your story. So this is a great way to start injecting this credibility so you can have a little bit of customer feedback on there. Another thing that you can display at your booth is if you have any kind of like certifications that are relevant to what you're doing at your booth. So for example, Eliana is actually a really good example of this. She has her own line of cosmetics and she has a degree in, I think it's cosmetic chemistry, if I have that correct. So honestly, having that at in some way, shape, or form, like present at the booth, even if it's like on your business cards, like, hey, I have, like a degree in this, like, or it's, maybe the formula is designed by somebody with, a degree. That's why, it makes me credible. This is another good example of ways to establish that credibility without like verbally having to push it down people's throats, is to have any kind of certifications or degrees or whatever somehow present at the booth or in your marketing. Now, another way that you can establish like, some kind of authority or credibility is to let shoppers know of your past experience. So maybe you're a veteran vendor who's been doing craft fairs for 5, 10, maybe even many more years. That experience is very valuable too. So, don't be afraid to, when you're, for example, if you're making a social media post and you're telling people, hey, come check me out, I'm going to be at this event and I'm going to be here on this day. Don't be afraid to tell people like, this is my 10th time there. I'm super excited. Those are little examples that you can kind of like drop into your everyday posts on social media that help to establish that authority and that credibility. Now, my final tip for this particular question is to encourage you to collaborate with peers, and specifically skilled peers, to establish credibility. So again, this is, a little bit easier to do online, but you can also do this in person as well. So there's many different ways that you can do this in person. Maybe you share a big booth with a vendor that you either admire or you kind of go hand in hand, like you gel well. If you don't share the booth, maybe you can ask the organizer to be neighbors if you guys are cool with being next door to each other. If you're in the same like realm of arts and crafts, like say you both make like ceramics and pottery, ask the organizer if it's okay. If you guys are cool with it, they're probably going to be cool with it, because generally when they're placing booths at a craft fair, that's what they're concerned about. They just don't want to put, two people next to each other that aren't expecting it, and then it's a conflict. But this is a really good way to, again, establish some credibility to kind of work with somebody who is looked up to as a peer. And if you're able to kind of match that energy, then that's definitely going to help to establish authority and credibility as well. All right, so her second question is, what should a vendor do when they're just beginning and have very little inventory? How do they create ways to set up a thin booth? So this is a really good question, and this applies to almost all of us as we kind of get started in our craft fair and art fair journey. So one thing that you should always keep in mind is that you should stick to proportionate booth sizes. So an easy way to kind of alleviate some of this, like this obstacle, is start off with like a small 6 foot or 8 foot spot. A lot of times these are offered at indoor shows, but if you can find them outdoors for, really inexpensive booth fees, then that's cool too. But yeah, this is a really good way to kind of get yourself started and expand out as you grow, and just keep that booth size proportionate to the amount of stock that you're going to bring to the event. So this is a good way to kind of get yourself started. I do encourage all vendors to, especially when you're first getting started and you're not quite like as locked in with your setup, to practice your setup at home. Do it in your backyard, do it in your garage, your basement, whatever it takes. And map it out on the floor. So tape your markings off in precise measurements. And then that way, when you get to the show, you already have kind of like a game plan for a 6 foot booth, an 8 foot booth, a 10 by 10 foot booth. Have these setups pretty much locked in and dialed in ahead of time, so that when you get to the show, there's no surprises, and you're not kind of like figuring out how to expand your booth and make it look filled in. You should already kind of have like a game plan for this. So now that we've mentioned some general tips on like how to go about doing this, let's talk about some detailed stuff. So how do you actually make a booth look full when there's not a whole lot of inventory and stock that you're bringing? So one thing that you can do is space out your displays a little bit. It's okay to have some breathability on your table. And in fact, I actually recommend it to vendors to have a little bit of division and space in between different types of items at their booth. Okay. So you don't want to have everything all crammed together, regardless of how much stock you're bringing, because it gets hard to focus on your items as a shopper when there's no breaks in between your items. So you want to have those natural breaks anyways. And one thing that you can do in the very beginning is to make those breaks a little bit bigger. Now, another thing that you can do when it comes to your items on your displays is to not pack in your displays. So as you get bigger and as the years go on, you're going to be able to kind of like cram more into your booth. And that's just going to be natural, because you're going to have like, more stock built up and things like that. You'll just be more prepared. But in the beginning, it's okay to just have displays that are, moderately used. You don't have to like jam pack every single display. I talked about breathability between displays before, but don't forget about like some breathability actually within each display. Okay. So that's going to give each individual item some room to shine too. So that's always another thing that you can do. Now, these next couple of tips in relation to that question are kind of general, but I think they apply to everyone. So I think they're really important. Okay, so the first of the two tips is to strike a balance between bringing as much stock as possible with maintaining that breathability and order at the booth. Okay, so there definitely is some kind of middle ground there. And as long as you recognize it and stay within that, I think you're going to be in good shape. Now, the second tip is that not having a lot of stock at a booth, you still can have a very inviting environment for shoppers. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception in craft fairs when it comes to this. I think vendors feel like they have to have their booth packed in order for it to feel inviting, and that's simply not true. You can have a really, really attractive booth, and the amount of inventory being displayed doesn't have to be super intense. So that's something that's really important to remember, because if you're a shopper, you can pretty much look at it one of two ways. You can see two booths, say two booths are side by side, right? And they both have the same amount of stock out there, the same amount of items to look at. But one booth has a whole theme tied in. There's colors that are all kind of matching. Maybe the signage is all matching, and there's a really, really nice theme and environment going on. Then the booth next door has the same amount of items, but there's no effort, no theme, no personality, nothing. Just a few items out there. Which one are you gonna visit? I mean, and at that point, does it really matter how much stock is at a booth? It's so much more about the theme, you guys. Like, there's the way that you display your booth, the way that you make it an experience for shoppers, that is absolutely crucial to your success. So try not to stress yourself out with, oh my God, I wish I would have made more for this show. Of course, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of us probably procrastinate like during the winter and the off season because it's the time to rest, basically. But don't stress yourself, because there's already so much stress involved with the craft fair, period. Don't put extra stress on yourself because of you thinking that you have to bring a certain amount in order for you to be successful. Okay, question number 3. How should a vendor pack up the contents of their booth? What are some tips on organizing the back and forth from show to home? Great question again. And again, this is something that I think every craft fair vendor can kind of benefit from hearing. So I'm going to kind of do a rapid fire. I wrote down 10 tips for this one, and I'm going to hit these kind of rapid fire. But yeah, at the end of the day, this again is something that is meant to alleviate your stress, and then also save you time. Save your time when you're packing up and unpacking, and then also recouping stock that might have gotten damaged during the process of transportation. So yeah, let's go ahead and run through these. So the first is that I have a suggestion to use sturdy containers. Don't skimp out on your totes or whatever you're using to transport everything. It is a good investment to buy some heavy duty containers, and make sure that they're durable. Stackable is also nice as well, especially when you're loading in and loading out. It's going to help keep your crafts protected during transportation. Okay, now the second thing I have is pack strategically. So you want to basically put a priority on your space and pack larger items in ways that are going to benefit you. So like when you're loading up your car, you're loading up your truck, whatever, put the heavy big stuff on the bottom. Okay, I mean, that just makes sense, because otherwise you're going to have things, it just could be like a not great situation. So when you're packing up your vehicle, just think about like what you're putting in first and what you're putting in on top of other stuff. Okay, you don't want things weighing other things down and breaking the stuff on the bottom. So that's why you want to put like the lighter, smaller stuff on top and the heavier stuff on the bottom. Okay, and then when you're actually gathering your things up to get it ready to get loaded out, Put the stuff in containers that make sense with one another. So you want to have like a tool bag or a tool container with all your supplies that you're going to need for the day. Then you're going to have your containers based on like your inventory and your product. Then you might have like miscellaneous, just, cell phone charger, tablet, whatever, So make sure that you're packing your stuff up in a way that makes sense and that you're not just randomly throwing things into totes and then opening up and then just kind of finding these rat's nest when you get to the craft fair. Okay, fourth tip is to invest in some packaging materials. So if you have something that you're really concerned about, like for instance, I just mentioned a tablet, wrap that up in bubble wrap and just take care of those things. The investments that you've made in your business, it's really important. And it's hard to make these purchases sometimes. So just be sure that you're protecting your investments and take the extra couple of minutes and bubble wrap your stuff, or even if you don't have like bubble wrap, you can use like some crumpled up newspaper to pad the packaging of items. So just take this into account and use this as needed. All right, so the fifth thing is that inside your vehicle, don't be afraid to secure things by using bungee cords. You want to just basically secure all those loose items as you travel to and from the event. You'll be making turns, you might be going over speed bumps, whatever. Um, you know, you don't want to take a bunch of time to load up your vehicle and be like, yeah, this looks great and I did a really good job. And then all of a sudden you get to the show and it looks like a bomb went off in the back of your car. So if you need to, just don't forget about tie downs and bungees and all this other stuff just to kind of keep the load a little bit more secure. Okay, tip number 6. We kind of talked about the totes and the containers before, but you should be labeling everything. So we talked about like the tool container and then the inventory containers. Have everything labeled out, and especially with your inventory, because let's say, for example, you have a booth that's a 10 by 10, and that's going to be 3 different tables, and each of those 3 tables features different types of items. When you unload your vehicle, it's nice to kind of set everything down like right where it's going to be displayed, just to save yourself those extra steps over and over. It's all about time and it's all about your energy. It's going to be a long day, both in time and just the drain physically on you. So every step matters. Save yourself the time and effort and set yourself up in the most organized way that you possibly can from the very beginning, and you'll be thanking yourself later for it. Okay, now the seventh one I have is to plan for some easy access items. So maybe one of the containers that you have is stuff that you're going to need to get into repeatedly. So this can happen before the show, like during setup. For example, people who price their items individually, where they have an individual price tag on every single item, they got to get to those price tags quickly and easily. And throughout the day, as the show is going on, this is the kind of container or tote that you want to have like underneath your table, but very easily accessible to you. So you kind of have to game plan ahead of time, like what your tote is going to be that you're going to be going into throughout the day, because you'll be needing to dive in and out of this thing depending on what's in there and what you'll need throughout the day. So just be sure that you have a game plan for that in place so that you're prepared when the show starts. Tip number 8, and I kind of already gave this one away in a previous tip, but I'll say it again because I wrote it down, but bring all necessary tools. It's so important to have this. And I have a craft fair checklist that's on Etsy. I'll put a link in the video description for that, but it's really good because I have a whole checklist for things that you should keep in mind and at least consider. And I have a whole section of it dedicated to hardware and tools. So on that are scissors, zip ties, wire cutters, tape, extra hooks, hangers, all this kind of stuff that you'll probably have to replace throughout the day. So yeah, like I said, you want to have a tote or a container specifically dedicated for this stuff because you will be needing it at some point throughout the day. Okay, tip number 9 is to keep weight distribution in mind in your vehicle. So we're kind of going back to the vehicle loading part. And this is really important and really, really easy to overlook. Now, we kind of talked about having like the smaller boxes on top and the heavier stuff on the bottom. This kind of goes hand in hand with that. You really have to like be careful with the weight of things. And this is where a lot of people get into problems when they get back home and they unload their vehicle and they start to look at their stuff and they start to see damage. A lot of times it's because of weight distribution and stuff being piled on top of one another. So keep this one in mind. Again, I know that I already kind of sort of touched on this in a previous tip, but weight distribution, extremely important. And tip number 10, this is a very important one. And again, easy to overlook, secure your vehicle. So a lot of us, what we'll do is pack up our vehicle the day before. And while this is very nice to kind of just wake up and then head out, it does pose a little bit of a risk. Okay. So just be mindful of how many chances you take with this. And then, I don't care if you live like in a small town or, maybe where you live, there's not a whole lot of crime, but just always, keep your doors locked and roll up your windows and stuff like that. Another thing that you can do too is keep a blanket in the back of your car. And if you happen to load your stuff up, when you're done, at least throw like a big blanket over it so that everything is concealed. That's at least one little bit of level of protection. But again, this is kind of just one of these things where, as craft fair vendors, we do take some risks when it comes to this, but just be calculated with them and do what you can to prevent these, mistakes and mishaps from happening. Okay, so Eliana, thank you for those questions. Great questions. And looking forward to see what you have next month. So my second channel member is Megan, and she has 3 questions as well. So her first question is, when it comes to someone who makes a multitude of products, what is the best way to market and display that to where it still looks cohesive, particularly if it doesn't have packaging to tie it all together? So this is a really, really good question. We see this situation a lot. So some vendors, they kind of have it, I don't want to say easy, but easier because of the fact that their entire booth might fall under one specific realm or niche of arts and crafts. So in their case, their theme and their consistency is represented already in their items. Okay, so they have a big, big head start on vendors who, on the other hand, have maybe a really wide variety of arts and crafts at their booth, and they're trying to figure out how to make it look like unified. So, in the situation of the secondary scenario that I outlined, a lot of it is going to come down to your booth, not your items. Okay, so your items are going to kind of work against you, and it's going to be up to everything else to start to tie in the experience. So we're talking about booth theme, and this is where you want to have like brand colors picked out and used throughout the entire booth. So maybe it's something like your tablecloths, your marketing banner, your logo. Your signage is going to be absolutely huge for this, particularly your pricing signage. So, what I would recommend vendors to do is to have one type, one style of pricing sign and repeat it at the booth and have that reflect the theme. So the sign can be like a certain shape. Maybe the shape is reflective of the theme. Get creative with it. But also the font color, the color of the sign itself, maybe even the texture of it. So some people use like a chalkboard sign. Some people use like paper printed signs, wooden signs. I've seen all sorts of stuff. So just be open to the possibility of using these like accessory type of items as your theme to establish, that kind of repeating pattern that we'll see at the booth. Okay, another thing you should also consider is the decorative elements or props, some people will call them, that you'll have at your booth. So this can be, sometimes it's displays. So sometimes displays have like a certain look to them where they're kind of going above and beyond like what a typical display will do. For instance, like wooden crates. Wooden crates can sometimes give off a lot of character and kind of support the theme while being a display item. Okay. So maybe this is something that you can do. And then also the decorative elements. So some people will use lighting, like such as string lighting, or they'll have like battery powered lighting that is kind of consistent and spread out at the booth. Some people will use greenery, like they'll actually have like plants or potted planters or vines or like garland or whatever. So that kind of greenery can be injected into the booth as well. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can do to make it still an experience where it's, one cohesive, blended, nice booth and still be able to express yourself in a wide variety of ways with your artwork in itself. All right. So just think about all the different things that you can do with your booth in order to make it one complete experience. Okay, Megan's second question. If the event you do is on uneven terrain, such as hillsides or rocky areas, what would be the most efficient and cost effective way to ensure stability in booths that have tables and stands that aren't on flat surfaces? Okay, this is obviously geared more towards the outdoor vendors, right? I mean, inside, we hope that it's going to be level. So, outdoor vendors, what you can do, there's a couple of different things, but mainly I would recommend that you check out the different types of levelers and equalizers that I found on Amazon. Again, the link is below in the description, but I'll show you a couple examples on the screen here of what I'm talking about. And they might take a few minutes to kind of set up and dial in during your prep portion of your day, but it could save you a whole bunch of time and headaches and actually potential accidents too with, tables toppling over or display toppling over because the table's not level. So it is worth the time and investment. That's why I really like this question, because it's something that this is definitely one of those things where super, super easy to overlook. And you kind of get to the event and it might be on grass and the grass is lumpy and stuff like that. And, you might be kind of panicking last minute. And then what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up trying to remedy the situation with objects that aren't made for this task. Okay, so you'll probably slide something underneath a foot of the table and it's not going to be done the right way. Okay, so these levelers and equalizers, they're very, very reasonably priced on Amazon. I think they're both like under $25 for a pack. Okay, I also would recommend that if you have a concern about leveling, that you actually bring a level along with all the other stuff that we've mentioned in this video before in your toolbox or tool bag or whatever you want to call it. Okay. That's going to give you the best reading. It's going to give you an instant readout of, if the thing is level or not. Sometimes when you're outside, it's a little bit hard to tell. You might be standing on some uneven grass and it's hard to tell if something is truly level. So to have a level in your tool bag, again, really, really cheap item. I'm not even going to, I'm not going to bother putting a link for that. I mean, but that's something that you should bring along with you too. I mean, all outdoor vendors, I would highly recommend it. Okay, and question number 3. If an event doesn't supply a power source, what are the best options for a vendor to use if they need a power source for things like lights or machines if they do products on the spot? For example, such as a t-shirt press or cutting machine. So there is a power bank that I've recommended on the channel before, and this is going to give you the ability to do a lot of basic tasks with electronics. So you'll be able to charge your phone, your tablet, your laptop, all that kind of stuff. It even can, handle lighting, no problem. However, if you need something that is beefier, I'd recommend that you start looking into bigger power banks. These go all the way up to pretty large sizes and capabilities. So, whatever your particular situation is, you can read up on them and get a little bit of an idea of their capabilities and how much you need for your particular situation. So, a power bank in general, I would recommend to most vendors. Okay. Now, some vendors just aren't going to use these at all, but I think a lot of vendors could benefit from them because most craft fair organizers are going to charge you an extra fee on top of your booth fee if you need electrical access at your booth. So, even just from a financial perspective, this is going to start to pay itself off in the long run. And sometimes at events, you run into situations where you need electric hookup at a booth, and maybe the event is out of electrical spaces, so maybe they only have like a certain number of electrical spots, and once they're gone, they're gone. So that is another really big hurdle when you have to consider having a power bank or not. um it just gives you peace of mind, basically, that you don't have to pay those kind of fees anymore, and that you can plug in at any moment wherever you want. So, outdoor show, indoor show, it don't matter. So, I think those are a lot of the reasons why I suggest a power bank. And again, pick one that suits you. These do start at a pretty reasonable cost, kind of depending on what you need. Some people are just kind of concerned with keeping their cell phones or tablets going because a lot of people are doing card transactions now. So, Square and all that stuff, it's they want to keep all that stuff, those electronics charged, so that they can take those payments and not be restricted to just cash. Then the demand goes up from there. So, like you said, it starts getting into live demonstrations where vendors are actually producing stuff literally live at the event, and that is going to require usually a significant amount of power. So, look for what you need. I would recommend the power bank, and yeah, I hope that kind of works out for you. These were six really good questions. Very excited about this series. I think this can be a lot of fun, and I think it can be both personalized towards specific situations, but I think a lot of these questions and answers are going to help a lot of people because I feel like these are situations where just about all vendors encounter them. So thank you so much for watching. I'm going to say check out the playlist above to check out all the other videos, but the playlist doesn't exist quite yet for video one. So if you're watching this after the first video, there you go. Check that out. And thank you all so much for watching.